Hey guys, hello to Keep It Dirty Off-Road, and we're standing next to the Gen 3 Raptor, and we got so much to cover.
You're in front of it.
And we're going to take a look at the outside styling, the fenders, the suspension. We spent a lot of time underneath this thing for everything you needed to know on the new Gen 3 Raptor. Here's a quick preview of what's to come in this video. Obviously, we're going to start off with the exterior first, take a look at all the new styling, the fender flares, the new pucks, and spend some time with that new tailgate, which is pretty trick. Next, we're going to move on with the interior, take a look at the Recaro seats. We're going to pop the hood. There are lots of changes there. We're also going to take a look at the suspension on the 37-inch version. Take a look at the front, the back, the new link system. So much to cover, guys, including the notch in the frame, the new exhaust. We also got to look at a 35-inch version so you guys can see the differences between a 37 and a 35. And then finally, these guys came to play, so we're going to take these trucks on the trail and see what they can do. This whole event was put together by
Raptor Junkies!
This was the Silver Lake Shakedown in Michigan. We had well over 40 trucks show up for some fun on the trails, on the dunes, and on a test track. And Ford Performance showed up with some Gen 3 Raptors. In fact, they showed up with 3 Gen 3 Raptors. 2 of them were 37-inch model, 1 was a 35-inch, and they also showed up with the Ranger Tremor. First thing that struck me walking around this truck was the styling is just, it's much more beefier feeling than before. The grille definitely is larger. I'm not so convinced on the lights just yet, but it definitely has larger presence than the Gen 2 and the Gen 1 has. I mean, the 37s almost look like 35s on this truck. It has that much of a large presence. I really dig the new graphics. The graphics look pretty cool, and obviously you got to get a peek for the link suspension while we're looking around the truck. The new taillights look pretty good. The bump on the back is very noticeable, that little notch in the back for 37. But overall, what really stood out to me was the color. That new code orange color is beautiful. If I were to spec a truck out, I think I would spec it out very close to this one. This one doesn't even have a sunroof, which makes it even more perfect for me. Another area that I want you guys to look at is look at the offset of the wheels. They have a much deeper offset. I think previously they were plus 34s. I'm guessing they're closer to plus 40 now. The new wheels are much farther out, and I think that was done on purpose to keep the truck width the same but increase the travel. You have to put the axles out farther in order to increase travel, so I think that's how they achieved it. Take a listen to that exhaust note. It's definitely stainless steel. First thing that stood out to me was the pucks. The pucks are much larger, they're more pronounced, they're much brighter. It's like this whole wedge shape setup. I think it's a welcome change, especially considering the old lights look like the DOT lights you see on most semis. These look specifically built for the Raptor, and it's much cleaner. Another thing that stood out was the fender flares. Look at how wide and how far out those fender flares come out. Close to 1 inch in the front, and in the back we were seeing about ½ an inch extra, with big difference from the old Raptor where they were almost flush. UF-150 guys already know about this. The new tailgate's really great. It's got a phone holder. It's got a couple rulers on there. It's a really cool design. You can get the Power Pro pack on these trucks, which is going to be great for camping. The new tailgate has the little pockets for clamps, which is great. We've done so many projects on the back of this truck, so having those on there is going to be so much better for us when it comes to actually working on our little projects. And then finally, the power liftgate. This is a great feature, especially for somebody like me that's really short. That tailgate is heavy. This is an awesome feature. All right, we got to do that one again.
Go ahead, Ethan.
All right, let it come back up. That's awesome.
That's good.
That's awesome. Now, for those of you wondering, yes, there are sensors in that tailgate to make sure you're not going to crush anything, and we put it to the test. Now, finally, the last area that I want to show you guys is a new trailer hook. There's a whole new trailer hookups back here, and it's not your traditional 4-pin. That is a 12-pin connection. Not sure what this is for. I actually have a question out to the Ford Performance team to get some clarification on what this is. I'm not sure if this adds extra sensors to your trailer, or maybe even adds an extra camera in the back, but it's very interesting to see that they're actually upgrading the trailing capacities of these trucks. Now we got very lucky and this truck ended up having both the B&O radio and the new Recaro seat. You can tell they're the Recaro seats because they have that suede insert, and new for 2021 they have that orange accent. Looks like they're trying to match the Ford blue with the code orange stitching. A lot of you Eagle Eye followers will notice there's a new Pro Pack onboard power. That's where the battery actually sits. You get the new storage container. But if you get the Recaro seats, it does not look like the storage area will be lockable. There's no lock. This truck was also like almost built for me because it does not have a sunroof, so it was almost perfect the off-road crowd. You do get new steps. The steps are redesigned, less cutouts, which is a good thing. Less dust going towards the back. The new Recaro seats definitely feel like they have a whole lot more bowstring in the sides. They feel much more thicker, and is it a different design? Is there a speaker in the headrest?
Yep.
You also get speakers in the headliner, and all the speakers are covered with this nice little billet aluminum looking covers, which I think is a kind of nice accent because Raptors have typically not had the nicest interior. They haven't had a platinum interior. Now let's pause right here to take a look at this. You have your standard controls for the outside lights. You have your standard light controls, but notice there's two new buttons here. There's one to enable the Pro Power in the back, and there's also a button to open the tailgate from the cab. Can we sit in it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breaking.
I know, right?
Want to be a bad deal for you, Dad.
Another change here is the drive modes. Typically on the Gen 2, the drive modes were sitting on the steering wheel. Now the drive modes get moved to the four-wheel drive button. Each one of the four-wheel drives is a different button, and then the drive modes can be toggled through that knob. Now this interior is very typical to what an F-150 has. There's obviously carbon fiber accents, there's Raptor logos everywhere, but this is basically your F-150 interior with the Raptor accents. You get that flat folding gear shifter, you get that area, that work surface, you get a very large center console, very, very similar to what the new F-150 has, and on top of it, you also get wireless charging at the front along with USB-C ports, which is all new. Now, one big change is you finally get a dedicated heated steering wheel button. That used to be a soft button in the dash. Now it's a button on the center console. There's also some new buttons here. You have your steering controls, you have your exhaust controls, and you have your suspension controls. So it looks like you can either use the knob or this center button here, and then the steering controls gets you from stiff to soft, and then your exhaust modes to make it louder. You do get two glove boxes, an upper glove box and a lower glove box. Upper glove box is actually pretty large. Looks like it'll be able to store most of the stuff you need. Lower glove box is about the same as what we had before. We did like the new accents of the B&O radio. I don't know, I'm kind of partial to that nice metal. It looks kind of cool. The seats are different. We have the Recaro seats on our 2020 Raptor right now, and they really hug you. The new 2021 Recaro seats are much wider. They don't hug you as much as the old seats used to. So I think they're accommodating the larger passenger here, because that was a common complaint. And one last item we want to call out here is, if you guys remember, the old Gen 2s had audio brake sensors. Now it's replaced by what looks like to be an IR sensor next to the mirror. Pop the hood, man. He said we could pop the hood, dude.
I heard the sound.
So I know you guys haven't released any specs on the engine. Will you guys be able to release any of that this week with us?
No, that's everything that's you guys have read online is what's been released.
I heard my mating call. The hood popping.
This one's not broken though.
Easy. It wasn't my engine.
All right, guys, there's a lot of changes under the hood. I mean, you can already see it. There's a little dimple there at the front. The battery location is slightly different. The wiring harness is different. There's a whole lot more plugs. The location of the fuse box changed a little bit. A lot of little changes going on here. It almost appears as if the geometry in here might have changed a little bit. Maybe they did it to accommodate the shocks. Not sure. We are going to try to get some time with the Ford Performance suspension designer to get more details on it. But it definitely looks different. There's a whole lot more electronics, and you could really tell that by the harness. Oh, I like the detail on the light. A little Raptor logo.
I like these changes right here in the grill around the F and the D to kind of define the outer letters a little bit.
Vents also changed substantially. There's a whole lot more vents. It looks like it's improved much more better airflow. Now, even though before Ford said the vents were functional on the sides, there wasn't really a straight path for those vents to vent. The new truck has a straight path. It looks like it's going to be far more efficient to vent out the side of the truck. One of the biggest changes we noticed in here is the whole braking system is completely different. Gone is the old traditional master cylinder style, replaced by a new, looks like electronically assisted ABS system. It is completely different. If you look here too, do you guys notice something missing? I think a lot of you viewers will probably catch this, but a lot of you guys are gonna miss this. So one thing we've noticed is, where are the IWE lines? Are they down here? No. Is there IWE lines going to the hubs? I'll get underneath this thing, man. So is that the IWE above the sensor?
It's gotta be. This is. I don't know what the hell this is.
Dude, it's a completely different
This
system.
is the vacuum hose. This is a vacuum hose.
It's a new IWE system, though, for sure, man.
Yeah.
Completely different. And where does that hose go?
Up about that. It goes up. I'm looking at it now. It's right below the ABS up there. I can see where it goes up to the ABS.
Yeah,
And
it's
it
all
tees
covered up.
off. It tees off up there.
I think it's down there. See, I can kind of see where the line's popping up.
Yeah, the line came
Right
up
there.
Right. Well, they got the check. There's a check valve right here.
Oh, is there a check valve right there?
Yeah. I'm trying to get it up. It's right there behind the.
So yeah, guys, we've been asking about this for a long time, right? We wanted a different IWE system because the current one wasn't reliable, and Ford definitely answered the call on the new truck. It's a completely different and new electronic IWE. There's a whole new hub design where now the ABS speed sensor and the IWE vacuum line are integrated together at the very top of the hub.
But remember, the IWE line on ours is 2 lines.
Yeah, it's 2 lines, so it's down to a single. Dude, that is... I wonder what change they did under here with the IWE system to make it more reliable. I bet you that. I'm hoping this is the change that we've been looking for to change the IWE to make it more reliable. Now, looking at the suspension, there's definitely some notable changes here. First of all, this is the 37-inch suspension. You can tell because of the black shocks with the orange accents. The lower control arms definitely look different. To me, they look a little bit longer, and the tie rods look a little bit longer. Tie rods look about the same. This definitely is longer. You could tell that that's longer. But it's similar design, but it's definitely different. It might be a little bit longer.
Say it might be a little longer. It looks a little longer.
Yeah, it definitely does look a little bit longer. Unfortunately, we still don't have caster camera locks from the factory. I wish Ford would make this change, but still, no, we still have a slot. Steering looks very similar. It doesn't look changed at all. They look more like the Gen 1 arms, honestly. The way these things look. You know, the Gen 1 arms are a little bit skinnier.
Yep.
Looking at the top of the shock, it's also very different from the current Raptor. This spring looks like there's more rungs in it. It looks like a heavier duty spring, most likely there to deal with the 37s. And it also looks to be a little bit preloaded too as well. Very similar style to if you ever did iBox or geyser springs on the front of your truck. That's kind of what we're looking at here. More springs, beefier spring to deal with the 37s. But see, you see what I mean about how the arm looks more like a Gen 1 style, a little bit skinnier and longer?
Yeah.
This gap is definitely much bigger than it was on the other one. That's what I'm telling you, man. I think this is farther out a little bit. Whether it's half an inch to an inch.
Yeah, they had to bring it out farther.
In order to get that extra travel. Have you looked at the top of the shock?
I heard you saying something about the bump stop.
Dude, there's like half an inch between the internal bump stop and the shaft in the top of the shock. Goes to show you how it's preloading it to deal with the 37s. Now the pinch wells look unchanged, so it'd be very interesting to see if there'd be actually any rubbing down the road. Now let's look at the rear suspension. This is probably what you guys are most interested in. The new link system is very impressive, but it's not perfect. Looking at the back end, you can see that the shock does look a little bit larger. The arms look pretty beefy. We've looked at the TRX arms and we saw how weak those were. The Gen 3 arms are a little thin though. That's the only drawback. I was hoping these would be thicker, but they're not. They're actually fairly thin. Back here, things are pretty beefy. The spring definitely looks more like a linear setup, kind of at a weird, funky angle. The rear end looks very similar. That looks like the 9 3/4 inch Ford rear end. And from talking to the Ford engineers, they're also using 410 gears, which is kind of surprising, right? I think we all expected upgraded gears. Frame looks relatively similar. The only difference back here is that little bump out in the back to accommodate the 37-inch spare. New stock bumps definitely look a little bit beefier than the old ones. The old ones are fairly useless. This one looks like it's a little bit more robust. One thing we would like to know is what other changes are done back here. From what we could tell was mainly just the back end of the frame was done. We haven't really seen any other major changes back here that would require accommodating the 37s, except for the way the pan arm was kind of flattened out. That pan arm looks fairly beefy, but if you look towards the middle, it is completely flattened out to accommodate the 37-inch spare. I could barely get my finger in between the spare and the pan arm, which I'm sure that's going to cause some problems moves down the road, and I'm sure that's going to make for some interesting upgrades later on down the road from the aftermarket. Now note here an interesting choice that Ford made with the control arms. They're not exactly parallel to each other. The top one's a little bit off to the side. It looks to be a clearance issue, so you have more up travel based on where the bump stop strikes, but it's definitely a little odd to see, especially after looking at the TRX arms. This is one of the drawbacks of running a much larger shock. The 3.0 shock means it needs more clearance, so obviously they had to get creative how to do this section here and control the up travel and everything else to make sure that everything clears correctly without any issues.
TRXs are straight on, but the TRXs are crappy hydroform arms that just do not look strong at all. These at least look beefy, and that little, you know, that little V pattern kind of makes it feel a little bit beefy. I just wish they were thicker. See how thin the metal is?
Yeah.
I wish they were thicker.
RPG or somebody's going to have a nice billet ones here.
Yeah, yeah. That just gonna be a couple grand though.
It'd be beautiful.
Yeah.
How would you go about putting a bump stop kit on it?
That's the thing.
That's what
the
we
only
were
way
looking at.
the only way to do it would be to integrate it into the frame where the old one is, because you can't really do it on the side because the shock mount's in the way.
Exactly.
I mean, you could probably do it at the sensors, but for me, that's too close to the tire.
I mean, and look at the up travel that it's sitting right here. It doesn't look like much.
No, that's only about 4 inches.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
4 or 5 inches. And it's not sitting with anything in the bed.
Is the bed empty? Because this thing,
The bed is empty.
It's empty.
that's
bed
got
is
quite a bit of droop then, man.
Yeah.
These trucks aren't meant to be all that high, but I bet you that they're designed to do some major droop.
I wonder, could you put a bump stop kit inside of
Yeah.
the spring?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, that'd
that's
be
a
an
good
idea.
idea, yeah. I've seen that on the Toyotas. That may be the only option here, man.
Mm-hmm.
To put it inside the seat. There's a nice cylinder in there. I bet you it could work.
Yep.
That could definitely work, man.
That'd be a nice package.
This back end is something. I didn't spend anywhere near as much time under the TRX as I was spending under this.
I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, so they got the X pipe back here.
This exhaust, the muffler exit.
It's funky, right?
Yeah, because
Oh,
right in the
three.
center of the X pipe, you have a third pipe that comes out and
That
goes
is
right into the
so
center of the
random.
X.
I got to give it up to Dave and Luke here. They're the ones that really notice this, but the exhaust is very, very different. The muffler and the resonator are combined into one, and it has 3 pipes coming out of it. And at first it perplexed us what this was. We started talking to the Ford engineers, and basically what you got is those 2 main pipes there have a flapper that controls their opening and closing. That's part of what makes the exhaust louder. The third pipe is a bypass to allow the exhaust to still build pressure and still flow correctly. When that third pipe's going, the truck is extremely quiet. When those 2 top pipes are opened up, she is very, very loud. And it's all part of that active exhaust system. And big thank you to Dave and Luke for noticing.
That must be. Remember, they said something about an active mode exhaust. That's probably where the valving system is. It's in there.
Dude, you're right. Is there any cables coming out? Yeah, see, there it is. There's the valve right above it.
Right above it's the valve, right?
There's a valve right above that
Yeah,
exhaust.
that's a flapper. You can see the bottom of it right there. See, right there.
Yep,
There's a flapper right there. That's what turns.
that's what it is.
Just like the GTRs, right? GTRs have the active exhaust.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the odd exhaust.
That's what it is right there.
That's it right there.
Good catch, man.
That's
This thing's beauty down here, man. It definitely, I would say, dude, this definitely looks way beefier than the TRX did. Because the TRX, even when we got under here, man, the way the torque arms is integrated and all that, it just looks like crap, man. This looks like it could last. This is very cool back here.
It's a beauty back here.
It's a whole nother level of build out here, man, that you just didn't see with somebody else, some of these other manufacturers.
Now, like I said earlier, along with the 2 37-inch trucks, Ford Performance also brought a base model 35-inch Raptor to the meet. Allowed us to take a look at the different trim levels, but also take a look at the differences in suspension from the 35-inch to the 37-inch. First big difference was the lights. These has the base model lights. I think they're still LED, but it's more reflector style. It's not like the projector style like you saw in the 37s. The front end definitely looks lower. It looks about the same height as your typical 35 is, the Gen 2 35 was, but the shocks are different. This one also had a little bump in the back for the 37s, which is kind of odd, right? This is a 35-inch model. We didn't expect that. It still has the LED taillights, which is kind of nice, and this one also showed the rhino lining. I love that Ford logo on the rhino lining. Forgot to point it out earlier, too. There's a camera on the bed, too, which is kind of cool. I guess you could check out to bed as you're going along. So after we took a quick peek at the outside, I really didn't care about the interior. I just wanted to see how the suspension was really different. What do you get for getting the 37s pack? First thing we noticed was the shocks. The shocks are very different. The shock bucket design, all those pieces of it look very much the same. The big thing that stood out to me was the springs. The springs are very different. If you look at the springs side by side, you can see that 37-inch springs are much more dense. There's more there. Very similar strategy that we've seen in the aftermarket to fit 37. We use a much stiffer spring to let us raise the truck up a little bit. The 37 front end is a little bit higher. So it looks like Ford Performance is doing the same thing here between the 35s and the 37s. The shocks are also very different. The look of the shocks is very much like the Gen 2 shocks. We do know that these shocks are different though, right? They're much faster, they can perform better, and they get more suspension travel than the Gen 2 Raptor. These also have the same electronic IWE, and based on our inspection, it definitely looks like the upper and lower control arms are the same. So it looks like both trucks have the same geometry, same setup. It's just the shocks are different and the springs are different. And that's kind of the consensus from the guys there as well, that it's mainly just shocks and springs that's the major change between the 37-inch and the 35-inch Raptor. Even when we look at the back looks almost identical. All the components look the same. You still have that sandwich section for the pan arm. The springs look a little bit different, but they're very similar. It's really hard to tell the difference between the two, honestly. If you look at them side by side, they look almost identical. I would say that maybe the 35-inch version maybe could be a little softer, but just looking at them straight on, they looked identical. Maybe there's a spacer here or something. Maybe the cup is different, but the back end, the springs looked identical. The only difference really is the shocks. These are pre-production trucks now, so we do expect them to not show everything exactly how it's going to be in production, but this 35-inch Raptor still had that same notch to the back. We did notice something here. The way the tire is held on is a little bit different. On the 35-inch version, the tire is held on straight up against the frame. There's actually a little notch in the frame for it. So the tire is held up right up against the frame completely, which looked very different than the 37s. When we went back and looked at the 37-inch truck, the spare tire had a small gap. It was actually hanging a little bit lower and wasn't actually touching the frame. And obviously the gaps between the rear of the frame and the pan arm were a little bit different. So I think that's it, guys. I think that's the major difference between the two trucks. It's mainly shocks, springs, and then rear section in the back. Oh, and obviously the shocks have different valving, guys. You can't ignore the fact that the shocks require a completely different tune. Both trucks will have the same gearing. They're going to have 410 gearing, which is also a surprise. I wish the 37s had a different gearing. We've all known that they drive a little bit sluggish, but we will see how they perform on the trail once they start coming out. Dirty. You know, it's a true test of a color to see how it looks dirty. This color looks good dirty.
right, then what do you think of the truck?
I like it.
That's it? That's all you have to say?
I'll be Jason. Yeah.
Yeah? That's it?
The back end is way more secure.
What do you mean secure?
It's sturdy.
It feels sturdier, I guess. What else? That's it?
I like the inside.
The inside's pretty fancy. But is that it? What do you think of the outside styling, though?
The outside styling, it's not lime green. Can't like it. I can't like it.
Because it's not lime green.
It's not lime green.
Okay. I guess that's a good reason if there ever was any.
But what I like the most is this. How it can go up and down by itself.
Yeah, that's a big back saver.
Yes. Because these are like...
That's some cool features. That's a wrap on our first look of the Gen 3. We had a lot of fun checking this thing out, man. We spent a lot of time underneath this truck. I'm liking what I'm seeing, but I have questions. And I'm hoping that we can work with the Ford Performance guys to get some of those questions answered in future videos. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Don't forget to put any questions or comments below. And before we sign off, big thank you to the Raptor Junkies. Big thank you to James and his crew for the way they treated us this weekend. And also a big thank you to Kimmery for inviting us out and letting us be a part of this event. We had a lot of fun, and we hope to do more events with them here pretty soon.
Don't forget Ford, the one who brought the Raptor.
Oh yeah, and big thank you to Ford Performance for giving us access to this truck and letting us really get our hands all over this. They wouldn't let us drive it, they wouldn't let us sit in it, but that's coming. That's coming. I know that's coming. We're going to work on that. We want to get some hand time with this truck, and we hope we can do that here in the future for you guys. So again, comments and questions below. Thanks for watching.